All right, hi, my name is Stepan Prichnicki, and I've been asked by some of the folks at Knowledge Society to answer some questions and talk about some of the things that you'll be discussing in your Studio Curious sessions. Um, so I'm going to do this as a one-take sort of deal. I got a bunch of sticky notes here, um, and I'm going to answer questions that the Knowledge Society folks sent to me, and we'll go from there. So there will be some information down here, which will mostly be questions and contact information. So the first piece that I'll put to you is my Twitter handle. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot them back at me. We're in a bit of a time delay, but I will get back to you. And then up here, I'm going to try to post any kind of links that might sort of give you additional information to any answers that I may be giving you. So let's start with the first question. So the first question here was, tell us a bit about the program that you've been involved with. So for the past 2 years, I've been working on a ministry secondment to a project called Student Work Study. Student Work Study essentially is a project that seeks to learn as much as we can from students themselves. So in general, what it looks like is student work study teachers like me are invited into a classroom for a period of 6 to 10 weeks, and we hang out with some of the students. We talk to them a lot about their work. We look deeply at their work and sometimes overanalyze it even. And their work and their interviews act as a provocation into deeper learning or into an inquiry cycle with their classroom teachers. So say, for instance, if a student is exhibiting a particular behavior, we might look a lot at their work and see like what kind of assets we can draw from that. We might also interview the students and ask them a bit about that. And then through a cycle of inquiry with their teacher, we'll also get sort of their perspective on how that might fit into the learning they're doing, and read a bunch and try some new stuff in a co-learning, co-teaching sort of atmosphere. I am going to post a couple links up there, so keep an eye out for those questions. Sorry, pardon me. Next question: why was the project important? I mean, this is coming from me, so I'm sure that the Ministry of Education might say something a little different. But for me personally, the importance came from the idea that really any industry should be focusing on their end user. And in the case of education, it really is an industry of learning where the end user is students. And Swiss was really kind of an opportunity to listen to those students and to give them every single benefit of the doubt that we could, and really learn from them as much as we could. And but then also interrogate all those things that they were telling us and showing us, and comparing it to other research and dialoguing with teachers and other professionals in the industry of education about learning. Next question. So the next question here is, what have you learned about the importance of building empathy with students? So I think what I learned the most was that it's really a struggle to do it. In fact, I'm not even really sure that you can fully and authentically ever empathize with anyone. You can come close, but ultimately, anything that someone is going to share with you, or anything a student would share with me, I had to realize that it was definitely being filtered. As we filter any relationship and any conversation that we have, it is always should be seen through a particular lens. I also learned that, I mean, shocker, like it requires a lot of respectful discourse. And I also realized really that as much as we'd like to think that we know everything about a particular person, that's very arrogant, and we need to ask more than know. Okay, so here we go. Next question. What enabled or hindered your learning, you learning, to build empathy from students? So I think things that really enabled that was tone setting. So from the very first day that I set foot in a classroom, whether it was a kindergarten classroom or a grade 12 classroom, anytime that I wanted to sit somewhere, I asked students, I said, can I sit with you? Is this chair okay? Do you mind? I would also always ask them, if I was going to ask them something, I would say, are you busy? And then if it was something that they were sharing, I would also ask them if I could write it down. Um, and after I'd finished writing it down, or after I'd finished recording, depending on their comfort level, sometimes we would document with video or with photo or with audio recordings. However I finished documenting it, I would always show that documentation back to students and ask them if I accurately captured what they were trying to say, if I got it right. Um, and I think that that sort of tone setting to say, did I get it right, is something that we can really all learn from, regardless of where we fit in education. Um, also learned that if you're going to be working with anyone, consistency really matters. So a number of our other colleagues in other districts, their approach to um, working with students was a bit different. They might come in for a week or two and then revisit that school a number of times during the year. They might come in a day a week every single week of the school year, and. I think that I really did prefer the model that my school board decided to work with, which was to be in a particular room as much as possible for a block of 6 to 10 weeks. So eventually you became somewhere between invisible and ultra visible. You became a part of the room, you became a part of the community. Um, and if you're hoping to dialogue respectfully with anyone, um, you need to earn that credibility first. I think the last thing I learned was how important it is to be non-judgmental and to really kind of ask more than know more. And some of the tools that we used to do that were conversation mapping, and there'll be a link up there. The other tool that we would often use was to take transcripts of student conversation and put them through any kind of like word cloud generator. So typically I'd use Wordle, but I mean, you can use any one you want. So I'll put a link for Wordle up there too. Something for you to play with. When someone is talking, take a transcript of everything, show the transcript back to the person, say, did I get it right? Once that comes up, then run it through this word cloud generator and see if there's any themes or language that comes up repeatedly, and then maybe start talking about those themes. Worth trying out. Next question was, what did you learn about listening? So at the end of each year as a student work study teacher, we're expected to submit a supposition paper. And that the idea with a supposition paper in this particular job is that it's a report on any kind of trends or really compelling stories that you might have been a part of throughout the year, and any kind of learning that might have led to. So my first year paper was actually all about listening, and there'll be a link right there. At the very end of it, there's 4 sort of immediately actionable items, and I'll go through those right now really quickly. So first is, if we're talking about listening, audience matters. So an authentic audience is one that is not listening for something, but is listening. So that kind of brings up some tensions with regards to assessment, because when we're assessing students and evaluating students even more so, we're listening for something, and it's not the best kind of listening you can do. There's a really good TED Talk that I saw and listened to after I had finished my supposition paper, and I'll post that up here. And that gives some sort of ideas on how we can be better listeners and listen more non-judgmentally. But I think audience, if you're going to be a good listener, you have to listen to everything, not just what you want to hear, and not just wait to say something else. Number 2, model and teach listening explicitly. So this is something that I can't speak to the Australian curriculum, but I know for a fact that listening is a part of our literacy and language curriculum in Ontario. And I will humbly say that I can't remember explicitly ever teaching listening. There was an expectation of good listening and bad listening, and sort of learning from teachable moments within the day. But I think that actually teaching listening skills and saying like, well, this is what we can do to be better listeners, and some cues might be from that TED Talk that I just posted for you. But if we can really kind of like unwrap that and start talking with our students, how do you listen in class? I think that that's something that merits some time in our classrooms. Number three, create opportunities for co-reflection with students. So we talk about co-reflecting with teachers often around student work. We had great success with co-reflection with students. I remember a couple moments that happened with a grade 8 student, and she told me, I remember sitting and looking through some work with her and her teachers, and at one point she just stopped and she looked at a particular math question and she said, I wonder what that person erased. And that led to all kinds of evolutions in how I approach math, only with pencil, to maybe there's some times that we need to use pen so that you can't erase it, because I think that what we learn from mistaken thinking is just as important from what we learn from successful thinking. In fact, probably more valuable is mistaken thinking, so that we can really start to interrogate, like, are there trends in these mistakes, and how can we sort of um, focus in and specify a little bit more instruction. Last but not least, number four, the last thing that I really learned about listening was that all students need to be listened to, not just the ones that raise their hands. And I say this often. I remember back to a multitude of parent-teacher interviews where I say the same thing. I wish I could hear more from your son or daughter. Can he or she please raise their hand more in class? And that's a case of shame on me. There are so many great tools that we can use to listen to students. Some are paper and pencil, like reflections and exit tickets in classroom. Others might be more digital tools, all kinds of, we talked about like a program called Today's Meet or the Post-it app, and different ways that students can write in what they're saying as well as say it. And I mean, also even just the value of asynchronous communication. Um, some people need some time to think, and conversation is so synchronized, it's so like in real time, that for those that need time to think, um, we're not honoring that. And to provide sort of a means for asynchronous communication as well as in real time communication is really important. Next question. What were some of your key takeaways? So I think that in addition to the listening takeaways, there's the idea of question asking. So the importance of asking questions to students whenever there's something that doesn't jive well. So instead of knowing why they got something wrong, as much as possible asking them why they might have done something. It's sort of that humility piece, and if we're talking about empathy, seek more to understand, you know. The other really big takeaway was the student work study really focused on an asset-based stance. So when we talk about anything children are doing in class, we typically focus more on what they can do, because those assets are building blocks. Like you can build from something that a student can do. Whereas if you're really sort of deficit-minded, can't this, can't that, it just leaves more questions. If you can't do this, well then what might you do? It's sort of a very blind manner of moving forward. Whereas that asset piece, we can start to craft some trajectories for learning once we can really identify what students can do. Last question. How will this experience change you as a teacher and the way that you teach? That's the million-dollar question. Our first day of school is tomorrow. So as I'm reflecting on this is what I'm thinking about, and it's what I've been thinking about ever since hearing that I will be back in a classroom this year. The short answer is I don't know. The sort of more developed answer is that I feel really rusty in my teaching right now. I'm nervous and anxious about starting again, and I'm wondering how much of anything that I've spent the last 2 years thinking about, reading about, and writing about add to a very sort of idealized narrative around education, and how much of it is going to work. I also wonder a lot about the group that I'm going to be working with, because everything that we kind of do in schools should really depend on the kids in front of us. So No real answer to that one, sorry. Like I said, if you have any more questions, please feel free to send them to that Twitter handle, um, or to work through anyone else. I think Katie also has my contact information. Feel free to ask her. Thanks. Bye bye.